I had heard the whispers about Poveglia Island, long before I ever set foot on its cursed shores. Some said it was haunted, others spoke of it as a living nightmare. I was never one for supernatural stories, but when a chance came to visit Italy, I couldn't resist. I had to see it for myself. I should have listened to my gut, but what I found on that island has stayed with me ever since. The horrors I encountered are etched into my mind, and every time I close my eyes, I see it again, the darkness that never left. It was an overcast day when I boarded the ferry from Venice. The sea was choppy, the wind biting, and the air had a damp, unsettling chill to it. There were only a few people on the boat, some locals who seemed to have an indifference about the place, and me, the naive tourist eager to experience something different. We sat in silence, the engines of the boat roaring against the waves, until we neared the island. The first thing that hit me as the island loomed closer wasn't the crumbling buildings or the overgrown vegetation, it was the silence. The air itself felt thick, like something was pressing down on me, forcing the life out of the world. It wasn't natural. It felt suffocating, oppressive, as though the island itself was holding its breath. I didn't realize it then, but that was the first sign. As the boat docked, I stepped off onto the dock, and the air felt even heavier. The island was small, only a couple of kilometers in circumference, but it seemed to stretch forever under the weight of its dark history. I walked with slow, deliberate steps, trying to shake off the feeling of unease creeping up my spine. The abandoned buildings, once hospitals and quarantine stations, were now falling apart. Windows were shattered, doors hanging off their hinges, and vines had overtaken the walls like nature was trying to erase the human mark on the land. I couldn't stop myself from taking pictures. The place was so eerie, so untouched by the modern world, that I couldn't help but feel like I was standing at the edge of time. The island had a tragic past, used as a quarantine station during the plague, and later a mental asylum. The bodies of the sick and insane had been buried here, their cries lost to history. It seemed fitting that such a place would be called a haunted island. I didn't believe in ghosts, at least not until I set foot inside the bell tower. The bell tower had once been a symbol of hope, or so I imagined. From what I'd read, it had been used to signal to boats approaching the island during its time as a quarantine station. Now, it was a haunting silhouette against the gray sky, its bell silent, its structure leaning and cracking. I couldn't resist. I had to see it up close. The climb up the tower was long and treacherous. Each step felt as if the stairs were groaning beneath me, protesting against the weight of time. I reached the top and stood there, staring out at the decaying landscape below. It was breathtaking in its sadness, an island that had once been a place of life, now a tomb for forgotten souls. But then I heard something. At first, it was faint, almost like the wind. A whispering, low and indistinct. My pulse quickened, and I stood still, listening. The wind picked up, but the sound didn't fade. It grew louder, more distinct. The whispering turned into a low hum, and then a voice. A single word. A plea. Help! I froze. The voice was so clear, so desperate, it sent a shiver down my spine. I looked around, expecting to see someone, but there was no one. I was alone. I stepped back from the edge of the tower, suddenly feeling exposed. My breath came in shallow gasps as I scanned the surroundings, trying to make sense of what I had heard. I shook my head, telling myself it was the wind, my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I'd heard something that wasn't supposed to be there. I decided to leave the bell tower and explore the rest of the island. I tried to push the incident from my mind, focusing instead on the chilling beauty around me. The trees twisted like skeletal arms, the walls of the old asylum cracked and broken. There was a coldness in the air that seemed to cling to me, seeping into my bones. I wandered deeper into the island, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. As I turned a corner, I stumbled upon a courtyard, its stone walls covered in moss. The center of the courtyard held a fountain, long since dry, its marble figures eroded by the ravages of time. As I approached the fountain, I noticed something strange, a shape lying in the center of the fountain, half buried in the dirt and rubble. I stepped closer, my curiosity getting the better of me. It looked like a body. A human figure, hunched over, its limbs twisted unnaturally. I reached out, but the air around me suddenly grew unbearably cold, and I froze. My hand hovered inches from the shape, and for a moment I couldn't move. That's when I saw it. The figure's head jerked up, its empty eye sockets staring into mine. I screamed, stumbling backward, my heart pounding in my chest. The body twitched and groaned as though awakening from a long slumber. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the stone as I fled from the courtyard, my mind screaming for me to leave, to get away from this place. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the island, where the boat was supposed to pick me up. I could see it in the distance, just barely visible against the gray horizon. I ran faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my legs burning with the effort. But something was following me. I could feel it, something moving just out of sight, just behind me. Every time I turned to look, I saw nothing. But I knew I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I quickened my pace. The island seemed to stretch farther, the dock growing more distant, the boat never getting any closer. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I stumbled upon a building. It was an old crumbling structure, one of the asylum's wings. I ran inside, desperate to hide, to escape whatever was pursuing me. The walls were lined with peeling paint, the floor cracked and uneven. I found a corner and huddled there, my heart racing, my hands shaking as I tried to catch my breath. That's when I heard it again. The whispers. Low and raspy, like a chorus of voices, rising and falling in a rhythmic chant. It was coming from everywhere, seeping through the walls, echoing in my ears. The voices weren't just whispers anymore. They were loud, frantic, desperate. They were begging for release. I looked around frantically, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the madness. And then I saw it. The walls seemed to move. Not physically, but in some strange, unnatural way. The stone was shifting, the plaster cracking as if something was pushing from the other side. The ground trembled beneath me, and I felt it. Something ancient, something powerful, something angry. The voices crescendoed, and then a silence. I dared to look up. The room was empty. But I knew, deep down, that whatever had been here had never left. The ferry arrived, though I hardly remember getting on. I don't remember the trip back, or the faces of the people around me. I just know that when I left Poveglia Island, something came with me. I can still hear the whispers in the back of my mind, feel the weight of those empty eyes watching me. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, certain that something is standing just at the edge of my bed. And when I close my eyes, I'm back on that island,